I was driving back from a work conference about 2 years ago, taking the back highways because I'd missed my original flight and had to catch a late one. By the time I hit the road, it was already past 2 a.m. The highway was one of those lonely stretches that cuts through farmland and forest, the kind where you might see another car every 20 minutes if you're lucky. I'd been driving for maybe an hour when my check engine light flashed on. At first, I thought I could make it to the next town, but then the car started shuddering. The temperature gauge climbed into the red zone, and I knew I was done. I managed to coast onto the shoulder before the engine died completely. I tried my phone first, obviously. No signal. Not even one bar. I sat there for a minute, weighing my options, which were pretty much non-existent. I'd passed a gas station about 30 miles back, and hadn't seen anything since. I turned on my hazards and hoped someone would come by. About 15 minutes later, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. I got out and waved my arms as the pickup truck slowed down. The driver rolled down his window and I explained my situation. He seemed friendly enough, said he'd call for a tow truck since he had service. I thanked him, relieved that my night wasn't going to be a complete disaster. Then he asked me something that made my stomach drop. "You out here all alone?" The way he said it, with this weird pause before the question, like he was confirming something rather than asking. I hesitated, then lied and said my boyfriend was sleeping in the back seat. He just nodded slowly, made his call, then told me the tow truck would be about 40 minutes. I expected him to drive off after that. He didn't. He pulled his truck about 50 feet ahead of mine and parked, just sat there with his engine running. I got back in my car and locked the doors, trying to convince myself he was just making sure I was safe. But every few minutes, I'd see him looking back at me in his side mirror. 20 minutes passed, then 30. He got out of his truck and started walking back toward me. I rolled my window down just a crack, and he asked if I wanted to wait in his truck where it was warmer. I told him I was fine, thanks. He stood there for a moment too long, then walked around my car slowly, like he was inspecting it. He tried my back door handle, said he was just checking to make sure everything was locked up tight for me. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I told him I'd called my boyfriend and he was almost there. Another lie, but I needed him to leave. He didn't. He went back to his truck, but didn't get in. He just leaned against it, watching me. I was terrified, but I tried the ignition one more time. To my shock, the engine turned over. It was rough, and the temperature gauge was still high, but it ran. I didn't think twice. I threw it in drive and got out of there, checking my rear-view mirror constantly. His headlights appeared behind me within seconds. He was following me. I pushed the car as hard as I could, even though I knew I was destroying the engine. When I saw a turn off ahead, I took it without signaling. He followed. I took another random turn. He was still there. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the struggling engine. The temperature gauge was buried in the red now, and I could smell something burning, but I didn't care. I had to get away from him. Every time I checked the mirror, those headlights were right there, never falling back, never losing me. Then I saw it up ahead, a truck stop. Lights blazing in the darkness like a beacon. I pulled in fast, tires squealing, and parked right in front of the main entrance where the security cameras were pointed. There were other people there, other cars, witnesses. I ran inside before my car had even fully stopped rolling. The clerk looked up, annoyed at first, but his expression changed when he saw my face. I was shaking, could barely get the words out. "There's someone following me. He won't leave. Please call the police." He grabbed his phone immediately and I pointed through the window. The pickup truck had pulled in behind me but stayed at the edge of the lot. Just idling there, headlights pointed at the building, watching, waiting. The clerk stayed on the phone with dispatch, describing the vehicle, reading off the plate number. I stood there frozen, staring at those headlights, convinced he was going to come in after me. But he didn't. He just waited. For 10 minutes we stood there in this horrible standoff, him in his truck, me in the fluorescent safety of the gas station. Then red and blue lights appeared on the highway and he suddenly backed up, tires screeching as he peeled out of a lot. The police tried to follow but lost him on the back roads. The officer who took my statement was older, had this weary look like he'd seen this before. He asked me detailed questions about the truck, about the man, about everything that happened. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. There had been 3 attempted abductions in that area over the past year. Women traveling alone, broken down or stopped at rest areas. Same MO every time. Offer to help, wait until they are vulnerable, then strike. They never caught him. The officer said the guy was smart, knew the area, knew which roads had cameras and which didn't. He told me I did everything right. Lying about having someone with me, not getting out of my car, not letting him get close, going somewhere public. He said most people don't think clearly enough in those situations to protect themselves. I ended up sleeping in a hotel that night, too scared to finish the drive. The next day, I had my car towed to a mechanic who confirmed what I already knew. I'd completely destroyed the engine pushing it that hard while it was overheating. The repair bill was almost $3,000, but I'm alive. And every time I drive at night now, I make sure my car is in perfect condition first. I keep my phone charged, my gas tank full, and I never ever pull over on a dark road unless I absolutely have to. Because I learned something that night. That feeling when something's wrong, when every instinct is screaming at you to get away, that's not paranoia. That's your brain recognizing danger before you consciously understand it. And sometimes, listening to that feeling is the only thing standing between you and ending up as another missing person statistic. This happened to me last October when I was driving back from my parents' place. It's about a 3-hour drive, mostly highway, and I'd stayed later than I planned. By the time I left, it was already past midnight. I remember my mom telling me to just stay over, that it was too late to be driving, but I had work early the next morning and couldn't miss it. For the first hour, everything was normal. A few cars here and there, mostly truckers, nothing unusual. The radio was playing some talk show I wasn't really listening to, and I was in that autopilot mode you get into on long drives. But somewhere around the halfway point, I noticed headlights behind me. Not tailgating or anything, just there, maintaining the same distance. Maybe 100 feet back, never getting closer, never falling further behind. I didn't think much of it at first. People take the same routes, right? But then I took my exit. One of those rural off-ramps that barely anyone uses because it's not near anything. Just farmland and a few scattered houses. The car followed. Okay, I thought, coincidence. I took a right at the stop sign. So did they. I took another right a mile down onto a road I knew led to a residential area. They turned too. My heart started pounding. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was tired and seeing patterns that weren't there. I had to know for sure. So I took a left onto a road I'd never been on before, one that clearly went nowhere based on the lack of street lights or houses, just darkness and trees on both sides. The headlights followed, staying exactly the same distance behind me. I sped up to 70. They matched my speed perfectly. I slowed down to 40. They did the same, maintaining that exact gap like we were connected by an invisible rope. Never getting closer, never falling back, just there, like a shadow attached to my car. I tried to see the make or model in my rearview mirror, but their high beams were on and all I could see was white light burning into my eyes. The fear was setting in now, real and sharp. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel and I was having trouble thinking straight. Every horror story I'd ever heard about people being followed home was running through my head. Couldn't go home. I couldn't let them know where I lived. But where could I go? I remembered there was a 24-hour gas station about 15 miles ahead, right off the highway. Cameras, lights, other people. That was my best shot. I got back on the highway, forcing myself to keep a normal speed, not wanting to do anything that might provoke whoever was behind me. I counted down the exits, watching those headlights in my mirror, the end. Entire time. When I finally saw the gas station, I pulled in fast and parked right in front of the main doors under the brightest lights. I ran inside, probably looking completely crazy, and told the clerk to call the police. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind until I pointed outside through the window. The car had pulled in behind me but parked at the far edge of the lot, just outside the reach of the overhead lights. Just sitting there, engine running. Headlights still pointed at the building, still watching, still waiting. The clerk made the call and I stood there by the register, too scared to take my eyes off that car, convinced that any second the door would open and someone would come after me. Other customers came and went, giving me weird looks as I stood there trembling, but I didn't care. I wasn't moving until the police arrived. It felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. The moment the patrol car pulled into the lot, the vehicle that had been following me suddenly reversed, tires squealing, and peeled out onto the highway. The officer tried to follow but came back 20 minutes later, shaking his head. He took my statement, asked me to describe the vehicle, the route I'd taken, everything I could remember. I told him about the perfect distance they'd maintained, the way they'd followed every turn. He wrote it all down. then asked if I'd gotten any of the license plate. I gave him the partial I'd managed to catch when they fled. He went to his car to run it, and when he came back, his expression had changed. The vehicle had been reported stolen 3 days earlier from a parking lot 2 towns over. Whoever was following me wasn't just some creep. They were actively evading police in a stolen car, which meant they had nothing to lose. The officer told me I did exactly the right thing by not going home, by going somewhere public with cameras and witnesses. He said they'd been getting reports of similar incidents along that highway for the past month. Someone in a dark sedan following solo drivers, usually women, for miles. Sometimes they'd give up when the person went somewhere public. Other times they'd follow them all the way home. There had been 2 break-ins at houses in the area where they suspected this was how the perpetrator had found the addresses. The officer offered to follow me home, and I took him up on it. Even with a police car behind me the entire way, I was terrified. I kept checking my mirrors for those headlights, convinced they'd reappear. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the officer waited until I was inside with the doors locked before he left. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with every light on, checking the windows every few minutes, jumping at every sound. For weeks afterward, I was paranoid every time I drove. I'd check my mirrors constantly, take random turns, circle my block 3 times before parking. My friends thought I was losing it. But here's what haunts me the most. They never caught whoever it was. The stolen car was found abandoned a week later in a grocery store parking lot, wiped clean. No prints, no DNA, nothing. And those reports of people being followed, they stopped after I went to the police. Just stopped completely. Like whoever it was decided to lie low or move to a different area. Sometimes I wonder if I was the one that got away. If going to that gas station instead of trying to outrun them or going home saved my life. Because the thing is, I'll never know what would have happened if I hadn't trusted that gut feeling that something was wrong. And I'm okay with never finding out. Now when I drive at night, I'm hyper aware of every car behind me. If the same vehicle is there for more than a few exits, I change my route immediately. I keep my doors locked, my phone charged and ready to call 911. And I never, ever dismiss that feeling anymore when something doesn't seem right. Because sometimes that feeling is the only warning you get. I'd been driving for 11 hours straight, making my way across the state for a job interview that could change my life. It was one of those opportunities you can't pass up, the kind where you drive through the night because the interview is at 9 a.m. and you live 600 miles away. I'd left right after work, figuring I'd drive through the night, maybe catch a few hours of sleep at a rest stop, then show up looking somewhat presentable. By 4 a.m., I was beyond exhausted. That dangerous kind of tired where your eyes keep closing even though you're terrified of falling asleep at the wheel. I'd already drifted onto the rumble strips twice, jerking awake to that horrible grinding sound. I needed to rest, just for a little bit, or I was going to end up wrapped around a tree. I pulled into a rest stop, one of those bare-bones places with just bathrooms and a parking lot. No food, no services, just a place to park and stretch your legs. There were maybe 3 other vehicles there, all parked near the bathroom building. I wanted quiet, somewhere away from the overhead lights and the sound of semi-trucks idling, so I parked at the far end of the lot, away from everyone. I locked my doors, reclined my seat, and set an alarm on my phone for 30 minutes. Just enough time to close my eyes and recharge a little. I don't know how long I'd actually been asleep when the tapping started. At first I thought it was part of a dream, but then I heard it again, louder. Tap, tap, tap on the glass. I jolted awake, disoriented, my heart already racing before I even knew why. There was a man standing right next to my driver's side window, bent down so his face was level with mine. He was motioning for me to roll down the window. My first instinct was panic, but he seemed normal enough. Middle-aged, wearing a jacket and jeans. Friendly smile on his face. Nothing immediately threatening. I cracked the window just enough to hear him, maybe 2 inches, certainly not enough for him to reach through. Hey man, sorry to wake you, but my car won't start. You got jumper cables? His voice was casual, apologetic even. Just a guy with car trouble asking for help. But something felt wrong. I looked past him at his car, which he'd parked right next to mine. That was the first thing that bothered me. The entire rest of the lot was empty, dozens of spaces, and he'd chosen to park directly next to me in the dark corner I'd specifically chosen because it was isolated. Sorry, I don't have any, I told him, which was true. He nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he leaned closer to my window. "That's okay. Could you give me a ride to the gas station? There's one just a few miles up the highway. I'll pay you for the gas and your trouble." I told him I couldn't. That was actually waiting for someone. A lie, but I needed an excuse that would make him leave. He kept insisting though, his voice getting a little harder, a little more aggressive. "Come on man, I'm stranded out here. It's just a quick ride, 10 minutes, tops." That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. His car, the one that supposedly wouldn't start, was running. I could see the exhaust coming from the tailpipe, a thin stream of vapor in the cold air. The engine was on. He didn't need a jump. He didn't need a ride. This was something else entirely. "Your car's running," I said, and the moment the words left my mouth, his expression changed. The friendly mask just dropped away, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Roll down your window," he said, and it wasn't a request anymore. It was a command. He tried my door handle, yanking on it hard. Locked. Thank God I'd locked it. I started my engine and he stepped back, but only for a second. Instead of walking away, he ran to his car. I thought maybe he was giving up, going to leave me alone. But then he threw it in reverse and positioned his vehicle so it was blocking my only exit. He deliberately boxed me in. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the car in reverse. There was just enough room to maneuver if I went over the curb and through the grass. I didn't think, I just acted. I backed up hard, cut my wheel, and bounced over the curb. My undercarriage scraped against concrete, and I heard something drag, but I didn't care. I got around him and onto the access road, tires spinning on the dewy grass before catching pavement. I thought I was clear. I thought it was over. But then I checked my rearview mirror, and he was right behind me. Not just following, actively chasing. He was on my bumper, so close I couldn't see his headlights, just the dark shape of his hood inches from my car. His high beams were on, flooding my mirrors with blinding white light. I got onto the highway and pushed my car as fast as it would go, 90, 95, weaving between the few other vehicles on the road. My exit was still 20 miles away, but I couldn't think about that. I could only focus on keeping control of my car, watching my mirrors where he was matching my every move. He stayed on me for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. Then I saw a sign for a town 2 miles ahead and I made a split-second decision. I took the exit way too fast, my tires screaming as I took the curve and headed straight for the center of town. I was looking for anything, a police station, a hospital, anywhere with lights and people and help. I found the police station on the main street, recognized it by the patrol cars parked out front. I pulled into their parking lot and laid on my horn, just held it down, making as much noise as possible. The second I turned into that lot, he vanished, just hit the brakes and reversed back onto the street, disappearing into the darkness like he'd never been there at all. 2 officers came running out, hands on their weapons, probably expecting some kind of emergency. I got out of my car, still shaking, and told them everything. They took my statement, asked detailed questions about what he looked like, what kind of car he was driving, everything I could remember. Then they sent an officer to check out the rest stop. He came back an hour later while I was still sitting in the station, too wired to even think about sleeping. The footage from the rest stop security cameras showed exactly what had happened. The man had been parked there for over 3 hours, just waiting in his car at the edge of the lot. I was the third solo traveler to pull in during his watch. The first 2 had parked near other vehicles, near the lights, and he'd left them alone. But I'd parked isolated, away from everyone, vulnerable. I'd made myself an easy target. They found similar incidents at rest stops up and down that highway going back months. Someone targeting solo travelers, usually during the early morning hours. Fewer witnesses. Some people had escaped like I did. Others hadn't been so lucky. There were 2 unsolved assaults and 1 missing person that they thought might be connected. The officer told me they'd circulate the description, put out a bolo, but he was honest with me. Without a plate number or a clear view of the guy's face, it was going to be hard to catch him. These guys, they know what they are doing. They know how to avoid cameras, how to pick their targets, how to disappear. I never made it to that interview. By the time I left the police station, I'd missed it entirely. But I called and explained what happened, and they rescheduled it for the following week. I got the job, actually, and it was worth it. But I had to drive that same route again to get there, and I've never been more terrified of a drive in my life. Now I don't stop at rest stops anymore, especially not alone. If I need to rest, I do it at a well-lit truck stop with cameras and lots of people around. I park under lights near the entrance where I can see and be seen. And I never, ever let my guard down. Because I learned something that night that I'll never forget. Predators don't just wait in dark alleys. Sometimes they wait in the places we think are safe, in rest stops and gas stations and parking lots, watching for someone who's vulnerable. Someone who's alone. Someone who makes the mistake of thinking they are safe just because there are lights and pavement and a bathroom nearby. They are patient and they are smart and they are counting on you to let your guard down for just a moment too long.